Thank you, Senator Wong. We'll now move to question time. Senator Mackenzie.
Thank you very much, Madam President. My question is to the Minister representing the Prime Minister, Senator Wong. Alice Springs, Tennant Creek and other remote towns across the Northern Territory have endured the failures of this government's policy agenda, with child sexual abuse, assaults and property damage a daily occurrence in many remote communities. In response to growing community concern and considerable pressure from the general public, the Prime Minister finally recently visited Alice Springs with less than 4 hours on the ground. Can the Minister advise why the Prime Minister thought it was acceptable to be a FIFO PM in Alice?
Thank you, Senator Mackenzie. Senator Wong.
Thank you, thank you, President. And I'm disappointed that Senator Mackenzie, on an issue such as what we are seeing in Alice Springs, would choose to make such a light-hearted quip in that way. We all know.
Senators, please continue. Senator Wong.
The Prime Minister, just on the visit first, before I go to the more substantive issue, which is the intergenerational disadvantage, the violence, what we are seeing on the ground in Alice Springs. I am advised that the Prime Minister had planned to visit Alice Springs in December, but no, he contracted COVID. He contracted COVID, and so that was delayed. Now, obviously, the next opportunity he was able to visit was the 24th of January. Minister Burney has visited Alice Springs on a number of occasions, and of course we are quite blessed in the Labor Party to have Senator McCarthy, the member for Lingiari and many others who engage very closely on these issues. Now, it is the case that yesterday the Prime Minister, as you know, announced additional support for the Northern Territory, and it is the case that the Stronger Futures program, which ended under you with no plan. So it is interesting in this place that you wish to come in here and play partisan politics on an issue where you dropped the ball. Where you dropped the ball at the end of the Stronger Futures program. Thank you,
Senator Wong. Your time has expired. Order. I'm going to call Senator Mackenzie for her order. Senator Mackenzie, first supplementary.
Thank you. Before the election, the Prime Minister said, and I quote, "If I'm the Prime Minister, I won't go missing when the going gets tough, or pose for photos and then disappear when the job's done." Can the Minister advise the Senate why the Prime Minister spent 3 nights at the Australian Open posing for photos and not a single night in Alice Springs?
Thank you, Senator Mackenzie. Senator Wong.
I'm interested that Senator Mackenzie chooses to remind everyone of what Mr Morrison was like. But what I would say is this. First, on the tennis, I mean, I hope that this is. I hope that you are very careful about who on your side has gone to major sporting events, because I can say to you, I remember a lot of Liberal Party ministers with a lot of good hats at the Melbourne Cup and other things. So
Senator Wong, please resume your seat. Senator Mackenzie.
Point of order on relevance, Madam President.
Just a moment, Senator Mackenzie. Order on my right. Senator Mackenzie.
Point of order on relevance, Madam President. The Minister was asked about time in Alice Springs, talking to local communities and addressing the crisis that's unfolding there.
Thank you, and I would ask for silence. Order. I would ask for silence. I had difficulty hearing Senator Wong because of all of the interjections. Senator Wong.
Well,
I'll listen closely.
were that you did ask me that question, because I would have treated that question with some respect. But no, you want to make a partisan point. Yep. You want to make a partisan point about the tennis. You want to make a partisan point about the tennis. Let me say this. Stronger Futures ended in July 2022. There was no plan, part of the previous government, to manage the transition. We have listened to community. We have listened to community and we have provided additional resources.
Thank you, Senator Wong. Your time has expired. Thank you, Senator Wong. Your time has expired. Senator Mackenzie, second supplementary.
Community leaders have warned the serious crime wave affecting the Northern Territory communities has the potential to spread to other remote communities across Western Australia, Queensland and South Australia, with the government's abolition of the cashless debit card. When will the Prime Minister visit those other communities where the CDC has been abolished?
Thank you, Senator Mackenzie. Senator Wong.
Well, I'm asked now about the CDC. I would make a few points. First, in relation to what we are seeing in the Northern Territory, it is distressing. It is deeply worrying, and it is devastating for communities, and that's why we're acting. That is why we're acting, and that is why recognising
Order on my
that
left. Senator Cash and Senator Ruston.
She's a very good minister.
That is why the Prime Minister, after consultation with the Northern Territory Government and after consultation with the Ms Anderson, Daryl Anderson, has made a decision, with the support of the Cabinet, to provide $250 million worth of additional funding for support. It is a reminder of how much all governments need to do to address the intergenerational disadvantage which we are seeing.
The time for this question has expired. Senator Pratt.
President, my question is to the Minister for Foreign Affairs, Senator Wong. In recent days, the world's been confronted with devastating scenes following earthquakes in Turkey and Syria. Can the Minister update the Senate on the situation on the ground, please?
Thank you, Senator Pratt. Minister.
I thank Senator Pratt for her question, and certainly, particularly overnight, what we have seen in Turkey and Syria has been devastating. And I know this is an issue that many colleagues in the chamber are concerned about and share Senator Pratt's interest and concern about these issues. So I want to acknowledge that so many from the Parliament and across the community have reached out to my office to express concern and to ask what they can do and what our country can do. The true extent of this devastation is still emerging. What we do know is that at 4:13 a.m. local time on Monday, a magnitude 7.8 earthquake struck Nurdar, Turkey, in the far east of the country near the border with Syria. Then, at 1:24 p.m. that afternoon, a second of magnitude 7.7 earthquake struck Elbistan, which is 80 kilometres to the south. The affected provinces have been devastated by a series of 100 aftershocks. The devastation of the earthquake spanned both Turkey and Syria, and we know that these are extraordinarily vulnerable parts of the world which are already devastated by conflict and by disruption. I'm not in a position to advise the Senate of verified numbers. What I can say is that media reports just before I came into question time put the number of those who have perished in these earthquakes of at least 3,800. This will almost certainly rise. Rescuers are still searching through collapsed buildings. Access to the affected areas is being hampered by damage to roads and collapsed buildings, severe weather and traffic from those trying to flee. The impact in Syria is still emerging, and the affected areas are in non-government held territories, which makes information very difficult to verify. The government is monitoring the situation closely, and in subsequent answers I'll respond to what the government is seeking to do.
Thank you, Senator Wong. Senator Pratt, first supplementary.
What do we know, please, about Australians in affected areas?
Thank you, Senator Pratt. Senator Wong.
Thank you. I know some MPs and senators have had Australians contact them about family in affected areas. Our diplomatic missions in Ankara, Beirut and Istanbul are working closely with local authorities to ascertain the welfare of our citizens. Ankara Post is following up on a small number of Australian citizens who may be in the affected areas, and I'm not in a position at this stage to provide any further details. Australians in need of emergency consular assistance should contact our 24-hour consular emergency centre, that is 612 6261 3305, and on 1300 555 135, the latter number if calling from within Australia.
Thank you, Senator Pratt. Senator Wong. Senator Pratt, second supplementary.
Thank you. What is the Australian government doing to support all those affected?
Senator Wong.
Thank you, Senator Pratt. The Prime Minister Albanese announced in the press conference held just over an hour and a half ago an initial commitment of $10 million in humanitarian aid to support the people of Turkey and Syria. $7 million will be dispersed immediately. $4 million of that will be delivered to support those affected in Turkey through the International Federation of the Red Cross and Red Crescent appeal. These funds will support the delivery of food, shelter and basic aid items. We have also allocated $3 million to northwest Syria to be delivered through UNICEF to assist with immediate needs with a particular focus on women and girls. An additional $3 million will be allocated as we work to understand needs on the ground. This is obviously a crisis. It is a crisis which is affecting so many of our fellow human beings. We will continue to monitor the unfolding situation on the ground.
Thank you, Senator Wong. Senator Birmingham.
President, I seek leave to make a short statement.
His leave is granted. Senator Birmingham.
President, I thank the Senate. Senator, can I associate the opposition and coalition parties with the remarks made by Senator Wong and the government in sending our most sincere condolences to the people of Turkey and Syria following yesterday's major earthquake and the events that have unfolded since. When we go to bed at night and tuck our children into bed, none of us imagine that the homes we are living in will collapse upon us in the midst of the night. As Turkey's ambassador to Australia said to me when I spoke with him earlier today, he recounted stories that he is seeing of those in the zone saying they now feel ashamed to go to sleep. The difficulties that are facing the human toll, not just the immediate loss of life, the many thousands to whom we send our love, prayers and best wishes who have lost loved ones, the thousands more injured, but of course the ongoing humanitarian crisis that follows from a tragedy and disaster like this. It is, of course, in these events we see the best of humanity, rescuers working heroically, international community responding comprehensively, disaster and aid workers coming to provide assistance, and even Ukraine fighting for its freedom, offering to provide support. We acknowledge and thank the government for the support that they have announced and provided. We stand with the government in supporting that and in supporting the Australian Turkish and Australian Syrian communities in this time of concern for all of them.
Thank you, Senator Birmingham. Senator Cash.
Thank you, President. And my question is to the Minister representing the Minister for Social Services, Senator Farrell. As reported by the West Australian newspaper today, in the WA goldfields town of Laverton, formerly a place where the cashless debit card was in operation, last week the Desert Inn Hotel, after discussions with the local police, voluntarily imposed liquor restrictions to combat alcohol-fuelled violence. What role has the withdrawal of the cashless debit card played in increasing crime, domestic violence and dysfunction in Laverton?
Thank you, Senator Cash. Senator Farrell.
Thank you, Madam President, and I thank Senator Cash for her question. The cashless debit card was obviously a controversial issue going into the last election, and as a government, as an opposition, we took to the Australian people the proposition that we should remove the cashless debit card. And of course, one of the first things that the new Minister for Social Services, Minister Rishworth, did was to introduce legislation into this place.
Senator Farrell, please resume your seat. Senator Cash.
You are, President, and I think it's pretty obvious the point of order is relevant. Could you at least direct your comments to the alcohol-fuelled violence in Laverton? Thank you, President.
Senator Cash. The Minister is being relevant. You have asked about the CDC. He's entitled to put the government's reasons for its abolition. Minister, please continue.
Thank you, thank you, Madam President. So we took the proposition to the Australian people, and that included Senator Cash, people in Western Australia, and well, the people in Western Australia voted overwhelmingly for an Anthony Albanese Labor government. In fact, you know, Senator Cash, you know as well as I do the number of seats that your government lost in Western Australia. So all I'm saying is,
Order. Senator Ruston. Minister, please continue.
Look. We took our policy to the last. We took our policy to the last election, and you would be appalled. You would be appalled if we didn't do what we said we were going to do.
Thank you, Minister. Your time has expired. Senator Cash.
Thank you, President. The Shire of Laverton President Patrick Hill was today reported as saying, "The kids are not getting fed, the women get bashed up, and it's going back to the way it was." Minister, what are you going to do to protect the women and children in Laverton and other towns around Australia where you've withdrawn the cashless debit card?
Thank you, Senator Cash. Minister.
Regrettably, Senator Cash, the issues that you raise as significant issues in Laverton are not unique to that town, and the whole issues. Let's take one of the issues that you're talking about. Let's take one of the issues that you're talking about. Senator Cash, when I'm deliberately answering or doing my best to answer your questions, well, that may be so. That may be so, but the people of Australia have made a decision, and one of the reasons they voted for us at the last election were our policies on domestic violence. One of the reasons they voted for us was our policies on domestic violence. Now, I don't say that overnight that we are going to solve all of the problems.
Thank you, Minister Farrell. Your time has expired. Just a moment, Senator Cash. I'll wait until there's silence on your side. Senator Ruston, I've just called for silence. Senator Cash, second supplementary.
Minister, will you commit to restoring the cashless debit card as a matter of urgency in Laverton and in other communities being ravaged by alcohol-fuelled crime, violence and dysfunction because your government abolished it last year? And will you apologise to the people of Laverton?
Thank you, Senator Cash. Minister Farrell.
Look, I can only reiterate the comments that Senator Wong made a few moments ago, that politicising these sorts of issues in this way, in this Senate, politicising these issues in this way does you no credit? Does you no credit, Senator Cash? It does you no credit. It does you no credit to take advantage of the issues that are going on in this town and other towns to try and get some sort of political advantage
Senator Farrell, Minister Farrell, please resume your seat. I'm going to ask for silence to allow the minister to finish the question. Please continue, Minister Farrell.
I reiterate my point. It doesn't do you any good, Senator Cash, to be seeking to use the disadvantage
Thank you, Minister. The time for this question has expired. Senator Waters.
Very much, President. My question is to Senator Wong, representing the Prime Minister. Last week's annual donations data release revealed around $2 million in donations from fossil fuel companies and lobbyists to both big parties, including $960,000 of that to the Labor Party. And in that financial year, 4 big donors are some of the highest polluting facilities covered by the proposed safeguard mechanism: Woodside, BlueScope, Chevron and Inpex. Collectively, they've donated over $200,000 to the Labor Party in 2021-22. How much access to the table did that buy when Labor was designing your weak safeguard mechanism legislation? And are those dirty donations why your safeguard mechanism backs new coal and gas?
Thank you, Senator Waters. Minister Wong.
I really reject the implication or the imputation of some form of corruption which is in that question. And I'm reminded when I was a minister many years ago, with much less grey hair, Senator Payne, what was her name? Senator Milne, was Senator Payne did vote with Senator Milne. In fact, they voted together to get the cashless debit card. Cashless debit. I'm very tired. The CPRS voted against that, and she would ask question after question to me about fossil fuel companies. And I remember saying to her at one point, you know, it is possible that we take a different position, not because we are corrupt, as is the implication, but because we just don't agree. We don't agree with a policy proposition. And that is the case. Now, I accept that there will be a contest over the safeguard mechanism. I have faith that Mr Bowen will ensure that what is presented to this parliament will have a cogent policy basis. You may not agree with it, and that is your right. But he will do so, as the Cabinet will do so, on the basis of our judgment about what is the best economic policy for the nation. So I do reject. Well, no, I'd say it's very easy, isn't it? And it's a campaigning tool. But I do reject this proposition that somehow a Labor government, which has taken a very ambitious position on climate, which has, let's be frank, paid a political price for many years as a consequence of holding the position on climate, would simply do what you're suggesting. That is not the case.
Thank you, Senator Wong. The time for this question has expired. Senator Waters, first supplementary.
Thanks, President. I note that the fossil fuel sector receives over $11 billion in public subsidies every year. I also note that the Mineral Resources Council donated $103,800 in donations to the Labor Party, and they recently promised to unleash an ad campaign against Labor unless it ruled out a windfall profits tax. We haven't seen a windfall profits tax, which could fund cost of living relief measures to actually help people. Has that donation brought your compliance on that issue?
Thank you, Senator Waters. The time's expired. Minister.
The answer is no. And I mean, you are talking to a party that has been honest with the Australian people for over a decade, that lost government, let's be clear, about our position on climate, that is honest with people and has, in the previous term of government, obviously paid a political price for holding a very clear and consistent position on climate. We have. And we went to the Australian people with a clear position about what we would do, and we will deliver it. We had a clear position on taxation, we had a clear position on climate policy, we had a clear position about utilising the safeguards mechanism, and we were upfront with the Australian people about why we wanted to do it and what we would do. So the implication that you want to make for political purposes in here, that somehow that is all because that is all untrue, is wrong. It is wrong.
Thank you,
and
Senator Wong.
It does not do you.
This question has expired. Senator Waters, second supplementary.
Thank you, President. Around half the donations given to political parties is dark money. It's not required to be disclosed because of inbuilt loopholes. That means cash for access meetings or donations through business forums as membership are not required to be disclosed. When will you shine a light on the masses of undisclosed money washing through this system and fix the system so that big money isn't buying access and outcomes?
Thank you, Senator Waters. Minister.
Well, I make this point. We continue to lead on political donation reform. I understand JSCM is also looking at this issue. I also understand, and I'm told, that donations were taken by the Greens political party from a professional gambler and a pastoral company, backed by one of South Africa's richest men. But you want to lecture us. You want to lecture us about this and make imputations that that the Labor Party, which went to the Australian people with a very clear policy position, implementing that policy position, you now want to say, for political purposes, that's corrupt. Well, you know what? I actually think all of the Australians who voted for climate action, all of the Australians who voted for the ambitious position that we went to the election with, deserve a Greens political party that might actually back in legislation that delivers on that ambitious, rather than taking potshots from that corner yet again.
Thank you, Senator Wong. Senator Stewart. Order. Order.
Enjoy.
I have a senator on her feet waiting to ask a question. Senator Stewart.
Thank you. My question is to the Minister representing the Treasurer, Senator Gallagher. Can the Minister please update the Senate on the work the Albanese government is doing to ease the cost of living pressures for all Australians?
Thank you, Senator Stewart. Minister.
Thank you. Thank you, President. And can I welcome Senator Stewart back and congratulate her on beautiful Ari, who we've had the pleasure of company since your return. But welcome back. Can I just say the Albanese government understands that cost of living pressures are a major concern for all Australians. We understand that it's not easy for households right now, and when I look at how other countries are faring, I think Australia is positioned well to ride out these economic uncertainty and some of the shocks that we've seen. As a member of the government's economic team, we are working hard every day to make sure that Australian challenges with inflation do not become worse. We are cleaning up after the wasted decade of the previous government, a record of inaction or worse, failure, including more than 20 failed energy policies. We saw a decade of wasted opportunities and wrong priorities that left Australia with falling real wages, cost of living pressures, $1 trillion of debt without an economic dividend to show for it. We have an economic plan that is a direct and deliberate response to the challenges facing the economy right now, including cost of living. And one of the very first acts of this government was to successfully argue for minimum wage to keep pace with inflation, an outcome which has helped around 2.7 million Australians see their incomes increase. Our first budget focused on responsible cost of living relief that didn't put extra pressure on inflation, which is an important thing to be working hand in hand with the RBA as they undertake their tightening cycle on interest rates. We've got cheaper childcare, expanding paid parental leave, cheaper medicine since the 1st of January. We're putting resources into affordable housing and getting wages moving again. These are the concrete steps that we have put in place in just the first few months.
Senator Stewart, first supplementary.
Thank you. Can the Minister update the Senate on the practical measures that the government has been taking to support households?
Thank you, Senator Stewart. Minister.
Thank you, and I thank Senator Stewart for the supplementary. There are some things in this economic environment that we are experiencing that are out of the government's control, such as the ongoing war in Europe and the ripple effects of the pandemic. But there are also things that are within our control, and the government is focused on those. So, as I said in the previous answer, making medicines cheaper, childcare cheaper, and of course relief to householders facing those rising energy costs, which the Senate dealt with in December last year. And let's not forget, because we won't ever forget, that you voted against it. The money that will flow to households to help with their energy bills, you voted against it. It was how this Senate could have stood up and provided that support to households, and the opposition tried to block it. We are focused on growing the economy the right way so that Australians can benefit from good skills, get good jobs and have good wages.
Thank you, Minister. Your time has expired. As Senator Stewart, second supplementary.
Thank you. Can the minister update the Senate on initiatives that have already started to have a direct impact on households and easing cost of living pressures?
Senator Gallagher.
Yes, Senator Stewart. Wages are beginning to move again, thanks to the government putting bargaining back in the hands of workers again, which those opposite oppose. You oppose the energy price relief. You also opposed sensible changes to improve the bargaining framework so that workers could get pay rises. It is no surprise after a decade of wage stagnation, a deliberate design feature of their economic architecture. Let us never forget that. 2%, stuck at 2% or worse, and we're already seeing wages starting to move, nudging just above 3%. But we get that households are still doing it tough. We understand that. The government's job is to look at where we can provide sensible cost of living relief without adding to inflation. That is the defining challenge as we go to put this budget together. The May budget will continue a focus on cost of living, including providing that household assistance for energy bills, working with the states and territories that you oppose.
Senator David Pocock.
Thank you, President. I have a question to the Minister representing the Minister for the Environment, Minister Watt. Australia is a world leader in many things that we celebrate, but one international title we have is a source of global shame, and that is our status as a world leader in species extinction. Over the past 200 years, our actions have sent 1 in 10 of our native mammals extinct. By comparison, the US, similar landmass, has lost just 1 species. If we don't act now, current and future generations of Australian children may never have an opportunity to see a numbat or a region honeyeater or a northern quoll. In October last year, the government committed to ending extinctions. Will the government commit to backing up this commitment with enough investment to ensure that this actually happens?
Thank you, Senator Pocock. I believe Senator Wong is the correct repping minister, so I've given her the call.
Thank you to Senator Pocock, and he is correct that we are a country, a nation that has one of the worst extinction records in the world. We have one of the worst mammal extinction records in the world. We have obviously seen land and water degradation, which has an effect not just on humans but on our many animal and plant species. I know that the Minister for the Environment has been very clear about the importance of working towards zero extinctions. This has been endorsed by every state and territory. As part of that, we are investing in excess of $200 million in the Saving Native Species program. We have put in place a new Threatened Species Action Plan which sets ambitious targets seeking to protect 30% of our land and seas by 2030. And of course, critically, we are looking at reform of the environmental legal framework. Senator Pocock would be familiar with the Samuels Review into the EPBC Act. Obviously, Ms Plibersek is taking forward a process to reform those to protect, restore and manage native habitats. The ACF, Australian Conservation Foundation, has welcomed the government's new threatened species objective and have made the very important point that extinction is a choice, and we need to choose a better path. We need to change the trajectory for the range of threatened species and their habitats, and certainly the government, and particularly Ms Plibersek, is focused on doing so.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Pocock, first supplementary.
Thank you, President. I welcome the government's commitment. Would point out that this will require significant investment. In fact, in 2019, 13 of Australia's most eminent environmental scientists looked at the question of how much it would take to do exactly that, to halt extinctions. And the figure then was about $1.7 billion per year. Does the government accept the overwhelming scientific evidence that we need significantly more investment in this area?
Thank you, Senator Pocock. Minister.
I would make a point, if I may, about funding. And one of the things that I certainly learnt as Finance Minister, and I'm sure Senator Gallagher is managing, is that there are very few requests for spending which are not worthy. There are some. We saw some under the previous government. Well, maybe a few of the sports rorts might have been a bit of a problem, but anyway. You know, we have completely legitimate requests for expenditure in environment, in climate, in energy, in social security, in a whole range of areas, including First Nations policies, health, Medicare, PBS, National Disability Insurance Scheme. All of these are matters. I'm making a point about. Well, I'm surprised that the Shadow Minister of Finance wouldn't like me to actually talk about opportunity costs, given that is the heart of the job you have to do. The heart of the job you're supposed to be doing.
Minister, your time has expired. Senator Pocock, second supplementary.
Thank you, President. Thank you, Minister. My question really is about funding, though. Will the government match ambition with action? And with a shortfall of some $1.6 billion at the moment, does the government have a plan for which species you're going to select to not go extinct and which we should just let go extinct?
Minister.
I understood very well what you were asking, Senator Pocock, and I was making the point that there are many areas of investment, particularly after 10 long years of those opposite investing in so many of the wrong things and so few of the right things. And the process of considering not just this area, but the many areas that demand funding, as well as the structural deficit that the Finance Minister has spoken about, obviously will be something the government will consider in the course of the budget. And you know, you would well understand. I appreciate as an independent senator, you know, your job is to represent your constituents and ensure that includes pushing the government to do more. But what I would say to you is we recognise this is a very important area. We are committed to getting this into a much better shape than it was, and Ms Plibersek has done an extraordinary job in last months to do so.
Thank you, Minister. Your time has expired.
But there is much.
Senator Hume.
Thank you, Madam President. My question is to the Minister representing the Treasurer, Senator Gallagher. In April last year, the now Treasurer said this is a full-blown cost of living crisis, a triple whammy of skyrocketing costs of living, falling wages and rising interest rates. Since the election, the cost of living has truly skyrocketed. Inflation is at its highest point in 30 years, real wages can't keep up, and interest rates are at their highest point in a decade. Minister, does the Treasurer acknowledge that under this Labor government there is truly a full-blown cost of living crisis?
Thank you, Senator Hume. Minister Gallagher.
Thank you, President. I thank Senator Hume for the question. And I think the government has been very clear that cost of living pressures and addressing them in a responsible and reasonable way is a priority for this government. In fact, from day one, when we first when Minister Bowen started to deal with the fact that we were going to have blackouts, from day one we've been dealing with the decade of delay, dysfunction and refusal to tackle the challenges that are now impacting households right across the country. So we accept that cost of living is a #1 issue for probably every household in this country. As a government, we have to look at the ways that we can ease that cost of living pressure in a way that doesn't add to inflation. And I think the major difference, there are a couple of differences. The largest quarter of inflation was in the March quarter last year, which was actually under you when you were in government. That was the largest quarter in terms of inflation growth. The other difference is that you have a government that's actually dealing with the issues rather than putting their head in the sand and pretending that everything was just fine. That is a major difference. So in energy, in health, in childcare, in energy prices, in cost of medicines, all of these areas that we're dealing with, And that's whilst we've got a budget that's heaving with $1 trillion of debt, while we're going through all of the terminating measures, the things that weren't funded properly. Remember all that? Yeah. The zombie measures that were never going to get through the Senate that you had there bolstering your bottom line. While we're fixing all of that, we're investing in those areas where we can make a difference to households without adding to inflation.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Hume, first supplementary.
Thank you, Madam President. The Cost of Living Committee last week heard that Woolworths charity partners have already told them that they will need increased food donations in 2024 and that there has been a 12% increase in the number of Australians struggling to pay their power bills. Minister, why hasn't the government delivered the $275 price cut or other cost of living relief that it promised last year to help Australians with their energy bills?
Good question. Thank you, Senator Hume. Minister.
Well, that question is just wrong. We are doing what we said we would do in terms of implementing our cost of living measures that we took to the election: cheaper childcare, cheaper medicines. We have been dealing with the energy crisis that you opposed.
Minister, please resume
the gall of you are.
Senator Hume, point of order.
On the issue of relevance, I specifically asked about energy bills.
Yes, and you started off with a couple of sentences around charity and increases. So the minister, I think, order. Senator O'Neill, a point of order is being called. I'm responding to it, and all I can hear is you. I ask all senators to be respectful and to listen and to be quiet. So I believe the minister's being relevant, but I'll continue to listen and I will direct her to the body of the question if she doesn't go there. Minister.
On energy, I mean, the gall, frankly, of being asked that question when you opposed the cost of living relief in the bill that this Senate passed in December last year. Over $1 billion to actually go to help with the cost of energy increases that occurred under your watch, that Minister Taylor, when he was minister, hid before the election. That's the increases people are feeling now, actually occurred under your government. We are dealing with it, and you opposed the money going in to get to households this year to help them to lower their energy bills by hundreds of dollars.
Thank you, Minister.
Sat there and said
Your
no.
Your time has expired. Senator Lambie.
Thank you, Madam President.
Oh, beg your pardon. Sorry.
I'm
way ahead of myself. Senator Hume, my apologies. Second supplementary.
Madam President, last week the Senate's Cost of Living Committee also heard that 800,000 Australian households are going to be coming off their fixed-rate mortgages and onto variable-rate mortgages throughout 2023. We heard that the cash rate rises this cycle have increased the typical Australian variable mortgage holders' repayments by around $10,000 per year. Minister, with the RBA increasing the cash rate again today, how much more will the average Australians with a variable mortgage be worse off under this Labor government?
Time, thanks, Senator. Minister.
Thank you. Dealing with the inflation challenge is the defining economic challenge facing the country. We've been very clear about that. The RBA has increased the cash rate by a further 25 basis points today. They are, of course, independent and make those decisions based on the economic data that they are seeing. And we have been saying for some time that we understand that these increases, particularly for those households where they have mortgages and often large mortgages, are significantly impacting their household budgets. There is no doubt about that. Depending on what to specifically answer your question, it depends on what your mortgage is and the terms with which.
Minister, please resume your seat. Senator Hume.
Thank you, Madam President. If the minister doesn't know the answer to this question, I would be very happy if she took it on notice.
Senator
point of order was relevance. She clearly didn't know the answer. If she doesn't know, I'm quite happy to have it taken on notice because it was a very specific question.
Please resume your seat. The minister is being directly relevant. Minister.
Well, it is, and it's very patronising of you, Senator Hume. I have the answers. It depends on how much you owe and the rates for which your mortgage is. But it is hundreds of dollars,
Thank you, Minister.
and we
Your
understand
time has
that.
expired. Senator Lambie.
Thank you, Madam President. My question is the Senator representing the Minister for Health, Senator Gallagher. And before I start, I actually want to thank the former senator in here, Senator Griff, for the work that he done on cancer over the time he was here. In Australia, brain cancer is one of the most common and deadliest cancers in children. Approximately 120 children are diagnosed each year with brain cancer, and for 45% of those children, their diagnosis is fatal. My question for the government is this: what new initiatives has the government introduced to address paediatric brain cancers? Is there anything it has introduced that is new, or are you still funding the previous programs that were introduced by the previous government?
Thank you, Senator Lambie. Minister Gallagher.
Thank you, President. I thank Senator Lambie for her advice that she would be asking a question on childhood cancer, and I acknowledge that the Senator also has a meeting with the Minister for Health next week to discuss a range of health issues. It is, and many of us went to the ovarian cancer breakfast this morning across the chamber. Cancer is something I think that has touched probably everybody's lives in this place, and in terms of childhood cancer, really, it is some of the statistics around childhood cancer and children who are diagnosed with brain cancer are very confronting. As Senator Lambie said, an estimated 102 children aged up to 14 were diagnosed with brain cancer, and 36 children are estimated to die from this disease. Cancers in children are often different from those observed in adults in appearance, site of origin and response to treatment, and they are also often quite difficult to diagnose, which does require that specialisation in paediatric cancer responses. So to just run through a couple of things that are underway, there is, over the last 10 years, $260 million for childhood cancer research through the National Health and Medical Research Council, the Medical Research Future Fund and Cancer Australia, and we've also committed $452 million to build new comprehensive cancer centres in Queensland and South Australia. We're also implementing $100 million to establish the nation's first Children's Comprehensive Cancer Centre in Sydney. This initiative is being led by the Children's Cancer Institute with delivery partners, and it will play an important role in Australia's health system and the network of comprehensive cancer centres going forward, combining research, cutting-edge treatment options, clinical trials, other multidisciplinary resources for children.
This question has expired. Senator Lambie, first supplementary.
Thank you, Madam President. How does federal funding for paediatric brain cancers compare with that under the previous government? And are you content to continue funding arrangements that were introduced by the previous government?
Thank you, Senator Lambie. Minister.
Thank you. I think I would probably take the detail of that on notice. I need to say that $100 million to establish the nation's first comprehensive children's cancer centre in Sydney is new, I understand, but I will check the record on that. In terms of health and how we fund, many of those services obviously are funded through the hospital agreement. That is coming up for renegotiation with the states and territories. There is no doubt there's a lot of need, not just in childhood cancer, but for hospital services in general, and we will engage with the states and territories on that. We understand, the health system is critically important. Funding the hospitals, getting that right is critically important, as is trying to fix primary care, Medicare and aged care, because it is all interconnected. But probably the detail I will come back to the Senator with if there's anything I have to update.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Lambie, second supplementary.
Thank you, Madam President. Statistically, brain cancer kills more children than any other disease. I'm just wondering, should this not be a higher priority than any other childhood health initiative this government is funding at this point in time?
Thank you, Senator Lambie. Minister.
Of course, making sure that we're doing all the research we can and provide all the treatment options possible for children suffering from cancer, including brain cancer, is I think it's something that every parent in this country would expect. It is funded through the hospital agreement primarily. I think the research is critically important because, again, the nature of childhood cancer means you do need subspecialisation in it, and so that research which feeds treatment options is part of that. Working internationally with other countries on their research and clinical trials, and also those comprehensive cancer centres. We established one here in Canberra, not for paediatrics but for people with cancer, and it does make a world of difference when you pull in all those services into one centre rather than making people go around and deal with different treatments. So I think there is a lot underway. If there's anything more I can update the chamber, I will do so on notice.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Ciccone.
Thank you very much, Madam President. My question is to the Minister for Foreign Affairs, Senator Wong. Could the Minister please provide an update to the Senate on the actions Australia has taken to increase pressure on the Iranian regime?
Minister.
Thank you to President, and can I thank Senator Ciccone not only for the question but for his consistent championing of human rights issues at home and abroad, and for his leadership as chair of the Senate Committee for Foreign Affairs, Defence and Trade. I appreciate the opportunity to work with him. And I know I speak for all senators, regardless of our political differences, when I say we stand in solidarity with the people of Iran, who have demonstrated immense bravery in the face of a brutal regime. The arrest and death of Mahsa Amini, whose Kurdish name was Gina, has sparked months of protests and demonstrations across Iran, and I've spoken on a number of occasions previously in this chamber about this. These brave protests have been met by brutal repression. Hundreds are now dead at the hands of the Iranian regime and thousands more jailed. From the beginning of this new crackdown, Australia has worked strategically to build pressure internationally on Iran. This government has taken stronger action against Iran on human rights than any previous Australian government. We were at the forefront of efforts to remove Iran from the Commission for the Status of Women. We co-sponsored and advocated for the successful Human Rights Council resolution establishing the independent investigation into human rights violations in Iran. Last year, we imposed Magnitsky-style human rights sanctions on 6 individuals and 2 entities, including Iran's morality police, over their involvement in the Iranian regime's abhorrent, flagrant and continued human rights violations. And just last week, I announced additional Magnitsky-style sanctions against 16 Iranian individuals and 1 Iranian entity. And in addition, we have joined partners to impose targeted sanctions on multiple Iranian individuals and entities involved in supplying and producing drones to Russia that have been used in the illegal and immoral invasion of Ukraine.
This question has expired. Senator Ciccone, first supplementary.
Thank you very much, President. Can the Minister please explain what actions the government has taken to put pressure on the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, commonly known as the IRGC? And I thank you for your earlier answer to my question.
Minister.
The Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps is a malignant actor, and it's long been a threat to international security and to its own people. The Gillard government understood this and put in place broad-based sanctions on the IRGC last decade. The Albanese government has also recognised the threat they represent. That is why we are using the tools available to take action, including sanctioning of 12 IRGC-linked officials and 7 IRGC-linked entities. I do understand those who are calling for the IRGC to be listed under the Criminal Code, and I understand they want the IRGC to face consequences for its actions. I would make this point that the purpose of listings under the Code is to make it easier to prosecute individuals in Australia for supporting terrorist organisations. Listing under the Criminal Code apply to non-state actors and not state actors, and the IRGC is regrettably a fully formed part of the Iranian state. I would note that none of our...
Thank you, Minister. The time for answering this question has expired. Senator Ciccone, second supplementary.
Thank you, President. And again, I thank the Minister for that response to my earlier question. Minister, how is the Australian government acting to prevent foreign interference here right at home?
Minister.
Thank you. I appreciate Senator Ciccone asking me this question because it gives me the opportunity to yet again speak to the Iranian-Australian community. The government is deeply concerned by reports of families and protesters being harassed and intimidated. We have put our views about foreign interference directly to the Iranian regime in no uncertain terms. The Department of Home Affairs Counter Foreign Interference Coordination Centre is working with the community to conduct targeted engagement of foreign interference. I say this, Australia's foreign interference laws are unequivocal. Allegations of foreign interference are investigated and, if substantiated, will be prosecuted. I say to the Iranian community here in Australia, you have a right to protest, you have a right to fully participate in our democracy. We stand with you and we will defend our democracy and people's right to protest and express their views within Australia, just as we stand up for the rights of those who do so around the world.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Ruston.
Thank you very much, President. My question is to the Minister representing the Minister for Immigration, Senator Watt. Workforce shortages are currently putting serious pressure on Australia's healthcare system, particularly in rural, regional and remote Australia. Considering this critical issue, why did your government not put 887 regional visas on the priority list, instead putting international workers who want to live and work in regional Australia to the bottom of the visa pile?
Minister.
Thank you, Senator Ruston, and thank you, Senator McKenzie, for recognising that I am such a friend of the regions. I'm glad you recognise this.
Minister Watt, please resume your seat. Senator McKenzie.
Senator Watt has misrepresented me to the Senate.
Senator McKenzie, what is your point? There's no point of order. Thank you. Minister, order on my right. Order. Minister, please continue.
Thank you, President. And sometimes Senator McKenzie says things before she thinks them through, and that was...
Senator Watt, please resume your seat. Senator Watt, Senator Ruston's asked a serious question to which she's entitled to a response, so please direct your answers to her question.
Thank you, President. And Senator Ruston does ask a serious question, because we know, and anyone in this chamber who spends any time in regional Australia, whether it be me, whether it be Senator Ruston, whether it be Senator McKenzie or many others, knows that for many years there has been a serious problem for regional Australians accessing healthcare. I've experienced it myself.
Minister, please resume your seat. Senator Ruston.
Thank you, Madam. Thank you, President. It's on a matter of relevance. I was actually asking the Minister about 887 visas and why your government has not prioritised 887 visas, which directly impact rural and regional Australia. I'd ask you to draw his attention to my question.
Thank you, Senator Ruston. And you also talked about the crisis of health in regional and rural areas, and I believe the Minister is being relevant, and if he's not, I will direct him to the question. Minister.
Thank you, President. And as I was saying, there has been a serious shortage of healthcare in rural and regional Australia for at least 10 years. And one of the reasons for that has been severe workforce shortages that this government is working on and acting on. Now, in the short time that we've been in office, the Albanese government has increased regional visas from 11,200 to 34,000 this financial year. Those who attended the Jobs and Skills Summit, which of course doesn't include any member of the Liberal Party, but did include the Leader of the National Party, Mr Littleproud, would have seen that this government committed to increase the regional migration intake to 34,000 just for this financial year. And it is our full intention to deliver these visas, which will go some way to assisting with the regional workforce shortages that Senator Ruston asks about, but indeed the regional workforce shortages that we see across every industry in regional Australia, yet another legacy of the poor planning and mismanagement of the former government. If there's one example in this space that really exemplifies those failures, let's not forget that the former government left a visa backlog of 1 million visas. 1 million people waiting for visas to be processed. We've got it down to 600,000 and we're going to go further.
Thank you, Minister. Your time has expired. Senator Ruston, first supplementary.
Thank you, President. In my electorate, a local GP living and working in the community is currently waiting for his 887 regional visa to be processed, but like other applicants of this visa, he's been knocked down to the bottom of the pile by your government. The constituent is providing essential primary care and his wife is a nurse and is equally providing critical care in our community. Why has your government neglected my regional community and others across Australia in their need to have doctors and nurses in their local area?
Order. 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 I have the minister on his feet. Minister Watt.
Thank you, President. Well, Senator Ruston, the answer to your question is very simple, and it's a 7-digit number, 1 million. 1 million visas. That was the backlog that we inherited from your government in visa applications. 1 million people who had applied for visas to work in healthcare and a range of other industries.
Oh, sorry, Senator Ruston. Order.
Thank you, President. The minister is obviously choosing not to answer my question.
Order. Order. Order on my right and left. Senator Ruston, I believe it's a point of order.
It's a point of order on relevance. This is a very serious issue for regional communities. I'm talking about 887 visas and why your government has chosen not to prioritise them.
Thank you, Minister Ruston. I believe the minister has been answering your question. I'll continue to listen closely. Minister.
Thank you, Minister. And I do know Senator Ruston's electorate. In fact, I had the pleasure of joining you to meet with people who'd experienced the floods in the Renmark region just before Christmas. And I'm not surprised that Renmark and that wider region is suffering
Minister
from extreme
Watt,
workforce shortages in the health area.
Minister Watt, please resume your seat. Senator Ruston.
Thank you, President. Your gratuitous response is not very becoming. But on relevance, I asked you specifically about 887 visas.
Senator Ruston,
do you know what an 887 visa
resume
is?
Your seat. When I give you the call, don't be disrespectful. If you're calling a point of order, stand and make that clear, not just launch into an attack on a minister because you don't like the answer to his question. Minister, please continue.
I'm very familiar with the issue, and it was obviously in the various newspapers today. And the point I'm making is that, unlike the former government, this government is actually dealing with the situation of extreme visa processing backlogs that we inherited. As I say, in the short time we've been in office, we have got the backlog of visa applications down to 600,000 from the 1 million that we inherited. And how did we do that? By actually putting more staff in the system to process those visas. Staff to support the visa system decreased by 20% from 2015-16 until we came to government, and that's the answer to the question.
Minister, Senator Ruston, second supplementary.
Thank you very much. Minister, will you please advise this chamber whether your government will commit to adding 887 visas to the priority list for processing, as you currently have done for the same workforce in city areas?
Thank you, Senator. Minister.
Thank you, President. Well, I'm absolutely happy to commit to the statement that our government will always run our migration program in the national interest. And of course it's in the national interest to ensure
Senator
that regional rural people
Senator
can get
Watt,
health care.
Please resume your seat. Senator Ruston.
Thank you, President. On a point of order in relevance, I was very tight in my question. I just asked the minister whether he would commit to the adding of the 887 visas to the priority list in the same way as they have in the cities.
Thank you, Senator Ruston. I'll direct the minister to the question. Minister.
Thank you, President. And again, this government will always run our migration program in the national interest, and part of that obviously is about ensuring that rural and regional Australians have access to the health care they deserve and the health care that they did not get for the 10 years of the Liberal National Party government. It's the Albanese government that is in the process of rebuilding our health system, whether it be in the cities or our regions. I have been out there in regional Australia door-knocking people who couldn't get GP appointments for 3 or 4 weeks.
Minister Wong? He hasn't finished. I was calling order. Thank you. But we got there, so Minister.
Sadly, for rural and regional Australians, the difficulties in accessing healthcare is not a new problem.
Order.
This is something that
Minister,
goes back.
Please resume your seat. Senator Ruston.
Yeah. Point of order. One last time. No, we're still in time. One last attempt at asking the minister whether he'll confirm whether 887 visas will be included.
Thank you, Minister. Thank you, Senator. The minister is being relevant. Minister.
Thank you, President. Again, the evidence is already in that this government is taking action to clear the backlog of visas that we were left by the former government. That will benefit rural and regional Australians for healthcare, and it will benefit employers right across rural and regional Australia.
Your time has expired. Senator Wong.
President, I ask that further questions be placed on notice. Thank you.